American GIs in the spring of 1945 expected to have to fight every inch of the way into Germany. They were prepared for fanatical Nazi resistance to the bitter end. Instead, in many towns they found something very different. Silence, white flags hanging from windows, and civilians who seemed relieved to see them. The Germany they entered was not at all what they had imagined after years of war. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you listen to these often, do hit like or subscribe. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always find it amazing seeing folks tuning in from all over, whether it's 7 AM in London or midnight in Sydney. Alright, tonight we're going back to Germany in 1945. But first, make sure you're comfortable. Seriously, settle in. Adjust your pillows, pull that blanket up, take a deep breath and relax. You won't want to move once we begin. It's before dawn, late March 1945. I find myself crouched on the western bank of the Rhine River, the great natural barrier into the heart of Germany. A cold mist clings to the water, and the air smells of mud and engine exhaust from our idling tanks and trucks. My rifle is slick in my hands from the dew. In the dim blue light, I can just make out the far shore. Germany. After all these years of war, after slogging through France and Belgium, I'm finally staring at the enemy's homeland itself. We had crossed frontiers before, into Normandy on D-Day, into liberated France, then Belgium, but this feels different. Germany. Even the name sends a shiver through me. We all grew up hearing about this place from newsreels and propaganda, imagining it as a fortress bristling with Nazi diehards. Now I'm here, heart hammering in my chest, waiting for the order to cross over. I flex my cold fingers on my rifle and try to steady my breathing. When the signal finally comes, it's almost a relief. We move out in darkness, scrambling into assault boats that slide into the icy river. My heart is thudding as I clamber into a canvas assault boat with 5 other guys. We push off, paddling low and hard. The river current catches us immediately, tugging downstream, but we angle against it. The water is black and swift, slapping the sides of our boat and splashing icy spray into our faces. Not far upstream, the twisted girders of a wrecked bridge jut from the water like black ribs, a reminder that the enemy tried to halt us here. I can barely make out the silhouette of the far bank ahead, a darker line against the overcast pre-dawn sky. In the distance, flares from earlier fighting still drift down, casting a ghostly glow on patches of the water. I grip the wooden side of the boat until my knuckles ache, trying not to think of what could happen if the enemy spots us midstream. Each breath I take is shallow and loud in my own ears. I hear one of my buddies muttering a prayer under his breath, and another quietly cursing the cold. The rope of the boat rubs against my leg, and I feel the chill of river water seeping through a small tear in the canvas hull. My boots are already wet. Across the dark expanse, I imagine dozens of similar boats with our men making the same journey, oars dipping silently. My mind flashes to images of George Washington crossing the Delaware. A bizarre comparison, perhaps, but here we are, another army crossing a great river in near silence, hoping for surprise. Only this time we're entering the heart of an enemy nation. My teeth chatter, whether from cold or nerves I can't tell. A few muffled splashes, whispered orders, the creak of wood and rubber. Otherwise it's eerily quiet. I half expect German machine guns to open up on us midstream, but the opposite bank remains dark and silent. My boots sink into the soft mud of the eastern bank. Just like that, I'm standing on German soil for the first time. It's strangely anticlimactic. No thunder of artillery, no hail of bullets, only the drip of water off the oars and our ragged breathing. As I crouch on German soil, a wave of memory washes over me. I think of all the ground we've covered to get here. The hedgerows of Normandy, the fields of Belgium, the frozen forests of the Ardennes during the Bulge. So many battles, so many friends left behind in graves across Europe. Sergeant Miller, who never made it out of that hedgerow ambush in July. Doc Parsons, our medic, killed by shrapnel in the Hurtgen forest. Countless others. They fought and bled to push the enemy back to this homeland, but they would never see what I'm seeing now. I feel a sorrow and a resolve swelling together in my chest. We owed it to them to finish this, to make sure crossing into Germany was the final chapter, not just another pause. Clenching my jaw, I silently dedicate this moment, stepping onto the enemy shore, to all those who didn't live to do the same. I look around in the gloom. There's a concrete bunker a few yards inland, its gun ports shattered and blackened from some earlier shelling. Barbed wire coils and sharp steel obstacles stick up from the earth. Part of Hitler's vaunted west wall, the Siegfried Line, now just abandoned teeth in the ground. A torn German helmet lies half buried in the mud next to an empty foxhole. Whoever was here has either fled or is dead. I approach the bunker carefully, the muzzle of my rifle leading. Inside the concrete embrasure I can just make out a machine gun mount, the barrel drooping downward, twisted and melted. The air around the opening smells of scorched metal and something acrid, the lingering ghost of exploded ordnance. A few empty shell casings gleam on the threshold, scattered like dull gold coins. Just outside the bunker, a dark shape lies sprawled in the mud. I inch closer and realise it's a body. A German soldier, face down, half covered by dirt. His grey uniform blends with the ground, one arm outstretched toward the river, as if even in death he was trying to crawl west. My stomach turns over as I swallow hard and step back. Whether he died in the bombardment or was shot earlier, I don't know, but he's the first dead German I've seen on German soil. It drives home the reality that yes, this is enemy ground, and even if this position was abandoned or knocked out, death still lingers here. Dawn is breaking as we fan out, pushing cautiously inland from the river. The eastern sky has gone from black to deep blue to a pale, colourless glow behind the silhouettes of bare trees. Dew clings to every blade of grass, and our footsteps on the dirt road sound unnaturally loud in the stillness of daybreak. I catch the distant crow of a rooster from somewhere beyond the village, a strangely normal sound in this surreal morning. Before we reach the village proper, a momentary scare sets our nerves on edge. As we advance down a hedgerow-lined lane, something rustles in the brush ahead. "Halt!" hisses the lieutenant, hand raised. We drop to knees or stomachs, weapons trained toward the sound. I can feel my pulse in my throat. A shape emerges through the morning mist, low, hunched. My finger tightens on the trigger. Then out trots a cow, brown and white, ambling across the road as if we don't exist. It flicks its tail and disappears into another thicket, leaving a trail of crushed grass. A couple of guys quietly exhale laughs, more relief than humour. I realise I've been holding my breath. We get back up and keep moving, a bit sheepish, but grateful it wasn't something more dangerous. That cow will never know it nearly got itself shot by a platoon of jumpy GIs. I can soon see a small village emerging from the morning fog about half a mile beyond the riverbank. The village itself is tiny, maybe a dozen houses along a single muddy main street. A little church steeple pokes above the red-tiled rooftops, and an old stone well sits at the crossroads in the centre of town. As we approach, I notice faded lace curtains fluttering in shuttered windows, and a bicycle lying abandoned against a fence. A dog barks somewhere, and then goes quiet. The whole place seems frozen in uneasy silence. When we get within shouting distance of the first houses, we spot it, a white sheet hanging from an upstairs window, fluttering slightly in the cold breeze, then another and another, white flags. We exchange confused glances. None of us expected the enemy village to greet us like this. A lone figure appears at the edge of the road ahead, just outside the village. It's an elderly man in a rumpled brown coat, hair dishevelled. He's holding a white cloth above his head with both arms, hands shaking so hard the fabric quivers. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows of us armed strangers across the cobblestones. Roosters crow and somewhere a church bell chimes 8. The ordinary morning routines of a village are colliding with the extraordinary reality of occupation. I tighten my grip on my rifle, but our lieutenant motions us to hold fire. The old man steps forward slowly. I can see now he's terrified. Even from a distance his face is ashen, and when he calls out his voice cracks. "Nicht schießen," he pleads in German, then struggling for English. "Don't shoot! No shooting!" He waves the white cloth desperately. Behind him, a few others peek out from doorways. Women, children, a couple of old ladies in kerchiefs. No young men that I can see at all. The whole village seems to be either very old or very young. It hits me that I don't see a single able-bodied man of military age. Just grandfathers and boys and women clutching toddlers. All the German men from about 15 to 50 are conspicuously missing, either gone as soldiers or dead or hiding. My breath eases out as I realise there might not be any fight here at all. We proceed into the village slowly, weapons ready, but it becomes clear there's no ambush waiting. A few civilians cluster by a water pump in the little square, watching us with fearful eyes. One woman in an apron holds a toddler tight against her hip, her face streaked with tears and soot. Another, perhaps the schoolteacher, stands stiffly with a white bedsheet flag clutched in both hands. They say nothing, just stare at us as if we might vanish or explode. I realise they might be expecting some harsh treatment, reprisal for everything that's happened. But we're too relieved ourselves to be cruel. We just want to secure the area and move on. When it becomes clear we aren't going to harm them, a few of the villagers actually sink to their knees in apparent gratitude or sheer emotional overload. One older woman covers her face and sobs uncontrollably, whether from relief, fear, or both. The tension slowly ebbs, replaced by a numb kind of acceptance. We are here, we have guns, but we aren't abusing them. I imagine the propaganda they were fed painted us as monsters. Now they seem almost baffled that we're treating them decently. My buddy mutters, "I think they're as scared of us as we were of them." Our lieutenant, with help from one of our guys who speaks a little German, addresses the gathered villagers in slow, simple words and gestures. They want to know if there are any German soldiers around, any weapons. The old man with the white flag rattles off a reply and shuffles toward the church. We follow, and around the side of the stone churchyard we find a small shed, where a few rifles and old hunting shotguns are stacked neatly, along with a couple of rusting military helmets. It looks like the local militia, the Volkssturm, left their arms here rather than put up a fight. There's even a single-shot Panzerfaust anti-tank weapon propped in the corner, thankfully unused. I exhale slowly. If they had fought, things would have gotten ugly on this little street. I'm silently grateful it ended the way it did, with a surrender rather than a shootout. Inside the village, morning light slants through lace curtains onto a small parlour as I step cautiously through the door of a tidy half-timbered cottage. My heart thumps in my ears. The place looks abandoned in a hurry. A chair is toppled over by the doorway. The air inside carries a faint scent of boiled cabbage and coal smoke, lingering ghosts of last night's supper and the stove's fire. Underneath is the slightly sweet mustiness of old wood and furniture polish. On the dining table there are crusts of dark bread and 2 porcelain cups of coffee, or coffee substitute, stone cold. A newspaper lies on the floor. I recognise the bold Gothic script of German print. In the corner, a radio sits silent and unplugged. What strikes me immediately is how cosy it all looks. Far nicer than many French homes I'd seen on the way here. There's a plush armchair with an embroidered pillow, a cabinet displaying delicate china figurines and shiny plates, a framed landscape painting on the wall, and next to it a small wooden crucifix. Above the mantel, I notice an empty hook and a lighter patch on the wallpaper, as if a picture that hung there was hastily removed. I have a strong hunch what it was. Probably a portrait of Hitler that someone took down and hid as we approached, not wanting to advertise any loyalty to the Führer now that we're here. In the kitchen, I quietly open a pantry cupboard, curiosity getting the better of me. To my surprise, there are rows of glass jars filled with preserved vegetables, a sack half full of potatoes, even a cured ham hanging from a hook. For a land at war this long, they don't seem as destitute as I'd expected. In France, we'd met families on the edge of starvation, but here the larder is stocked. The civilians outside didn't look malnourished either. Frightened, yes, but not starving in rags. It dawns on me that despite all the bombing and fighting, daily life in Germany may have been better supplied, at least until now, than in the places we'd liberated. The realization leaves a bitter taste. Part of me begrudges that these people, whose leaders started this war, might have eaten better through it than the French or Brits who suffered under them. On a sideboard by the door, my eye catches a small framed photograph. I pick it up carefully. It's a portrait of a family, a husband and wife flanking a young man in an army uniform. The young German soldier is beaming with pride, his helmet tucked under his arm, a swastika armband visible on his sleeve. The parents look proud, but also a bit anxious. I wonder where that boy is now. Fighting on some front? Lying dead in a trench in Russia or Italy? Or maybe he's one of the ones who just surrendered to us across the river? The thought makes me pause. To me, he's the enemy, a kraut in uniform, but here in my hands, he's also someone's son, captured forever, smiling in happier times. I set the photo down. My hand is trembling a little, though I tell myself it's just the adrenaline wearing off. This war has ripped so many families apart, on both sides. Standing in this quiet living room, it really hits me. We've brought the war right into these people's homes now. Up until today, the front lines were always somewhere else. Now the front is here, in their village, in their very living room, and I'm standing in it. On a whim, I gently pull open a drawer in the sideboard below the photograph. Inside are neatly stacked letters and a small leather-bound diary. The letters are in German, of course, but I recognise field post markings. Likely correspondence from that son in uniform to his parents here. My German is rudimentary, but I can pick out a few phrases and meanings. One letter, dated just a month ago, starts with Liebe Mutter, Dear Mother. I scan for words I know. Gesund, healthy, Hoffnung, hope, Heimat, homeland. It sounds like the young soldier was assuring his mother he was all right, telling her not to worry. Another page, later dated, has more desperate tones, even in words I barely understand. Mentions of cold, of friends lost. One line stands out. Wir hören, der Krieg wird bald zu Ende sein, aber wie? We hear the war will soon end, but how? There is an undercurrent of fear and confusion, even as he tells her to stay safe. I gingerly open the diary, flipping to the last written pages. The handwriting is a woman's, probably the mother's. Short entries, scattered. One from last week. Stiller Himmel heute. Keine Bomben, danke, Gott. Quiet sky today. No bombs. Thank God. Another entry. Kartoffeln fast aus. Kinder immer hungrig. Wo ist Hans? Potatoes almost gone. Children always hungry. Where is Hans? Hans. Perhaps the son or maybe the father. The final entry is from 2 days ago. Amerikaner in der Nähe. Angst. Habe weiße Tücher vorbereitet. Americans nearby, afraid, have prepared white cloths. That entry sends a shiver through me. Those white flags we saw weren't spontaneous. This mother had them ready, hoping surrender might spare them. In that moment, standing in her parlour, I feel like I've intruded on something deeply personal. I close the diary and carefully put everything back as I found it. It's clear the people who lived here were terrified, hungry, clinging to hope and fear in equal measure. Not so different from civilians I'd seen in France, or even from your soldiers in some ways, worrying about our own families and futures. This war, I realise, has inflicted a similar dread on everyone, regardless of which side they're on. Outside, the lieutenant is organising a small detail to stay behind and handle the surrendered weapons and civilians until follow-on troops arrive. We leave a small detachment behind to take charge of the situation, and by afternoon my company is marching onward, deeper into Germany. Only when things calmed down did I notice the knot in my stomach. Partly nerves, partly sheer hunger. I'd been too anxious to eat since the night before, and the smell of that abandoned bread in the cottage had reminded me just how hungry I was. A quick rest and some cold rations would have to do for now. There was no telling when we'd get a hot meal again. That first village remains etched in my mind as we move on. We bivouac just a few miles beyond it that night, using an abandoned farmhouse as shelter. The day's adrenaline fades, replaced by bone-deep weariness. Our lieutenant, deeming the area secure enough, tells us we can grab some rest indoors. I end up in a small upstairs bedroom that clearly belonged to a child, faded floral wallpaper and a shelf of wooden toys in one corner. The child's bed is tiny, so I lower myself onto the larger bed across the hall, likely the parents' room. I sink into a real mattress and pillow for the first time in weeks. My body almost doesn't know how to react. For months it's been accustomed to digging into earth or hard floors at night. Now, enveloped in softness, every ache from endless marching and digging foxholes seems to ease, if only for this night. The linens smell faintly of lavender and soap, a ghost of domestic life. It's a far cry from the damp foxholes and barn floors I've slept on lately. Lying there, staring up at the dark ceiling, I listen to the unfamiliar creaks of a German house at night. A grandfather clock downstairs chimes softly. Through the open window, a cool breeze carries the scent of night-blooming flowers and distant wisps of smoke. Somewhere far off, artillery rumbles. Another town getting a pounding, maybe. But here, there's an almost uncanny peace. My mind won't let go so easily, though. I keep thinking about the family that lived in this house. Where are they now? Did they flee when they heard us coming this morning? Are they huddled in a cellar down the road? Or were they the ones I saw at the water pump? I imagine a mother and father and their little girl, maybe the one whose toys are gathering dust next door, spending this night in some cold basement while I lie in their bed. The thought makes me uneasy. War turns everything upside down. I'm a stranger occupying the most personal space of an enemy family, yet I mean them no harm and they never hurt me personally. How did it come to this? One evening, not long after, a cold spring rain blows in as we pause near another farm. We hole up in a hay barn on an abandoned farm for the night. The rain drummed on the tiled roof in a steady, soothing patter. Water leaks through a few holes, tapping onto the floor in one corner. I find a dry spot atop a pile of hay and settle in, pulling my damp blanket around my shoulders. In the dim lantern light, a few of us quietly chat or scribble in journals while others doze. The sweet smell of dry hay mixes with the damp chill in the air. I pull a few bundles around me for extra warmth, grateful for even this simple comfort. Somewhere in the rafters, pigeons coo softly, unsettled by the storm. The rain is a lullaby on the roof, punctuated by the occasional distant growl of thunder. Or is it artillery? It's hard to tell out here, but tonight I believe it's just thunder. Tucked beside my photo of home in my pocket is a letter I'd received a few days earlier, mail finally catching up to us from weeks back. It's from my kid sister, dated early March. I unfold the pages and read by the lantern's glow for the 10th time. She talks about getting ready for her high school graduation, about how the apple trees are blooming back home, about Mom hanging a new flag on our porch for when I return. She writes that she prays for me every night and can't wait for me to come home and take her to the county fair like I promised. I can practically see her bubbly handwriting dancing with excitement between the lines. In that dusty barn, in a war-torn foreign land, those words from home are pure gold. They remind me exactly what I'm fighting to get back to, a world where apple blossoms and county fairs still exist in peace. I carefully refold the letter and slip it away, swallowing the lump in my throat. Nearby, two of my squad mates, Corporal Jennings and Private Lee, are murmuring softly. I overhear snatches of their talk beneath the patter of rain. They're talking about home. First thing I'm going to do when I get back, Jennings whispers, is eat a whole apple pie. My ma makes the best in Georgia, and sleep in a real bed for a week straight. Lee chuckles quietly. Pi sounds damn fine. Me? I just want to see the Pacific Ocean again. Grew up in Oregon. Used to go out to the beach every weekend. I miss that smell of salt and seaweed. Think we'll even know how to live normal again, Jennings says after a pause. Feels like forever since I wasn't in a uniform. Lee is silent a moment, then replies, I don't know. I guess we'll relearn one day at a time. Kinda scary though, ain't it? The war ending. I find myself nodding in the dark. Scary indeed. You dream for years of it being over, but when that wish comes true, you wonder what fills the void. At least we'll have stories to tell, I interject softly, surprising them, even if some of them we might not want to. They look over and smile in the near darkness. It's a small moment of understanding. We've all been changed by this, and we all wonder what peace will bring for men who've known nothing but war in their adulthood. Eventually exhaustion overtakes these spiralling thoughts. My eyelids grow heavy. As I drift off, I have a fleeting memory of my own home. My bedroom back in Ohio, the way my mum would crack the door to check on me at night when I was a kid. The contrast is jarring and poignant. Before I know it, I'm asleep, swallowed by the soft darkness of a German night. April comes, and with it a quickening of our advance. The weather clears into a pale spring sunshine that makes the days a little less miserable. Days blur together as we push deeper into Germany. Each morning starts early, a tin of lukewarm coffee substitute and hardtack for breakfast. Then we're on the move at first light. We ride on tanks or march along muddy roads lined with budding spring trees. By midday, our legs ache and uniforms are spattered with mud up to the knees. When we halt briefly, guys pass around cigarettes and stretch out on any dry spot they can find. Some jot a few lines in journals or scribble quick letters home, not knowing when they'll get mailed, but writing anyway. I often find myself scanning the horizon during those pauses. The church spires and red roofs of distant villages, the columns of smoke from battles ahead or behind. There's a rhythm to it. Move, fight a little or not, move again. We grow used to this routine of conquest. Town after town, field after field, mile after mile, we traverse a country in collapse. Every town had its own story. Some, like that first village, surrendered the moment we arrived. Elders standing at the entrance with white flags and trembling hands. In a few places we even encountered delegates before reaching the town, villagers who walked miles toward our lines carrying homemade white banners to beg us not to shell their homes. We would disarm any stray German soldiers and assure the envoys that if no one shot at us, we wouldn't harm their town. It was a strange way to wage war, almost courteous. But by 1945, most sane people on both sides just wanted to save lives and property. Sometimes we skirt around larger cities rather than fight through them, but even from a distance we can see their plumes of smoke and shattered skylines. I recall one night march where the horizon flickered orange from a burning city, perhaps Frankfurt or Stuttgart, a hellish aurora that lit up the low clouds. Even without entering, we felt the devastation radiating from those places. The first thing that many of us notice about Germany is its beauty. The majority of German cities, crossroads and bridges have been destroyed by Allied bombing raids, but the bulk of Germany's rural areas and suburbs have escaped relatively unscathed. We find ourselves moving through parts of the countryside that look almost untouched by war. We march over rolling hills covered with aromatic pine and fir forests so dense that sunlight barely reaches the ground at midday. The frequent hills are blanketed in these dark, cool woods. Clear, bubbling streams run down into wide, lovely valleys, all intensively cultivated. The quaint little towns in those valleys look like illustrations from Grimm's fairy tales. Red gabled houses around a church spire, neat hedgerows and tidy vegetable plots. Sometimes, amid the quiet beauty, we spot civilians carrying on with stubborn normalcy. I recall one morning seeing an old farmer out in his field, pushing a plough behind an ox as our column rumbled past. He gave only a brief, wary glance at our tanks before focusing back on his furrows, as if spring planting still mattered more than the armies on the road. It struck me that life was trying to persist, even with war at its doorstep. I spot wildlife now and then, a family of deer bounding across a distant meadow, and rabbits that dart away as our convoy approaches, their cotton tails flashing. Birds are returning to the trees. Their songs during our morning marches are a strange counterpoint to the far-off rumble of war. Overhead, our fighter planes sometimes circle lazily, silver wings catching the sun. We don't even flinch at their drone anymore. We know they're ours, and the once dreaded Luftwaffe is nowhere to be seen. The sky belongs to us, another sign that the war is tipping our way. It's almost easy to forget what lies over the next hill, but the reminders are never far. Beyond one picturesque valley, we crest a rise and see smoke smudging the horizon. A city burning. Earlier that day, we passed through another small town that hadn't given up so peacefully. There, smouldering wrecks of German anti-tank guns and a couple of burnt-out panzer tanks littered the main road. Evidence of a brief but ferocious last stand. The bodies of a few German soldiers lay where they fell. Boys, really. Some looked no older than 16 or 17, clutching rifles or Panzerfaust launchers. A hastily painted slogan on one crumbling wall declared Besser tot als rot. Better dead than red. It seemed some of Hitler's diehards took that motto seriously. They'd chosen to fight and die even as everything was collapsing around them. We drove past that grim scene in silence, the acrid smell of cordite and charred metal heavy in the air. It was a stark reminder that not every town would greet us with white flags. Some corners of Germany were still willing to bleed, even in April 1945. We eventually approach our first large German city. The news from other fronts filters to us occasionally. We heard that on April 20th, Hitler's birthday ironically, American troops captured Nuremberg, the city where the Nazis once held their giant rallies. Our boys reportedly raised the stars and stripes over the grand stadium where Hitler had harangued his masses, a poetic justice that lifted our spirits. We weren't there to see it, but just knowing those Nazi symbols were being torn down felt like vindication. The 5-day battle for Nuremberg ended with the Germans surrendering on April 20th, and I remember one of our officers reading the bulletin to us. We all cheered and clapped when we heard about the flag going up in Hitlerplatz. If Nuremberg, the Nazi heartland city, had fallen, surely the rest would soon. Our unit isn't needed in Nuremberg's ruins. We're pushing further east. The first large city we enter leaves me reeling. From a distance it looked like the broken teeth of some giant creature, but up close it's worse. Entire neighbourhoods levelled. Blocks and blocks of it nothing but skeletons of buildings open to the sky. We ride in on our tanks and trucks along a boulevard where every storefront window is blown out and piles of brick rubble spill into the street, narrowing it to a lane. An overturned tram car lies in the intersection ahead, its metal sides perforated by shrapnel, a frozen tableau of chaos. Broken telegraph wires hang low from splintered poles sparking occasionally. A cracked water main gurgles somewhere, spilling into a crater and turning dust into thick slurry. The smell hits me first, a mix of brick dust, smoke and something rotten underneath. Fires still smoulder here and there from recent bombing raids. We pass a collapsed apartment block where civilians are digging frantically with their bare hands. They're trying to free people buried in the debris. A woman in a soot-stained dress stands off to the side clutching a little girl, both of them dazed, just staring at the ruins of their home. Nearby, the carcass of a horse lies still harnessed to a shattered wagon, legs sticking out stiffly. Flies already buzz around it. The sickly sweet smell of carrion mixes with the smoke. A uniquely awful stench of war in Germany, where so much transport still relies on horses. As we move toward the city centre, I spot tattered red banners with black swastikas hanging from a few lampposts, fluttering, torn and almost pathetic. One has fallen into the street, run over and caked in mud. On a wall, a propaganda poster somehow survived the blasts. It shows a stern German soldier and the words Sieg oder Untergang, victory or ruin. Well, ruin has arrived. The poster's edges are singed and the message feels like a cruel joke amidst this devastation. We dismount and patrol on foot through what used to be a grand square. In the middle stands the shattered remains of a statue, just a pair of bronze boots on a pedestal, the rest of the figure toppled and crushed. I wonder who it was. Maybe some Nazi martyr or old Prussian hero. Whoever it was, he's literally off his pedestal now. On one side of the square, what's left of a large church looms, its roof gone, black char streaking the stone walls. Sunlight beams through collapsed rafters, illuminating floating dust where pews once stood. The steeple has broken in half. The top section crashed down into the nave. A heavy church bell lies cracked on the ground, as if war itself told it one last time. Near my feet, I notice a child's doll half buried in the dust, one glass eye staring skyward. It's missing an arm and its dress is blackened by soot. I wonder what happened to the child it belonged to. Such little human touches among the wreckage make my throat tighten. A mangy dog skitters by, ribs showing through its matted fur, sniffing at a pile of garbage that was once someone's belongings. It startles at our approach and slips away down a side alley. Even the animals here are frightened and lost. Not many civilians approach us at first. A few peep from doorways or around piles of rubble. They're pale, dust-covered, hollow-eyed. We encounter almost no young men again. Mainly older folks, women and children. They seem too shell-shocked to even fear us much. It's like the bombing has numbed them beyond terror. Even so, when one of our Sherman tanks clanks into the square, a group of civilians instinctively flinches and raises their hands, as if expecting we might gun them down on sight. We don't, of course. We just tell them through a translator to stay calm, to gather in one area so we can sort things out. We start checking buildings. Many are still burning or unsafe to enter, but the City Hall, the Rat House, stands mostly intact at the far end of the square. A heavy stone edifice scorched by fire on one side. Our squad is ordered to clear it. We step into a grand lobby with marble floors covered in shattered glass from a blown-out skylight above. It is dim and smells of smoke and something else, something acrid. The beam of my flashlight dances over gilded portraits on the walls, stern-faced officials of years past. We call out, but no one answers. Climbing the wide staircase, we move carefully down a corridor of offices. At an ornate double door at the end, marked Bürgermeister Schussmeier, our lieutenant pushes in cautiously. What I see inside stops me cold. It's a lavish office. Or it was. The furniture is heavy oak. There are paintings of pastoral scenes on the walls, a thick Persian rug underfoot. But it's the people that freeze my breath. There's a family of figures seated on the leather chairs around a desk, so still and composed that for a second it looks like a tableau set up for a photograph. An older man in a formal suit, a woman in a dark dress, maybe his wife, and a younger woman in a nurse's uniform, and two children, a boy and a girl, slumped together on a couch, as if sleeping. It takes a moment to register that none of them are alive. The smell of bitter almonds hangs in the air, and on the desk I see an open tin of what looks like cyanide capsules. They killed themselves. The mayor, his family, all dead by their own hand, sitting there as though waiting for an appointment that will never come. My stomach turns over. We knew some Nazi diehards might do this rather than surrender, but witnessing it is something else entirely. One of the other GIs mutters a curse under his breath, crossing himself. We back out of that room quietly, leaving that eerie, peaceful death scene undisturbed. We silently continue clearing the building. In a lower hall, a large swastika banner still hangs on the wall amidst portraits of Hitler and other officials. One of our sergeants walks up to it, pulls it down with a single yank and spits on it. "No more of that," he mutters. He later cuts a piece of the red fabric to keep as a trophy, a memento of the day Nazi power truly fell in this city. I pocket a small metal party badge that had been dropped on the floor, not out of admiration, but as a reminder of what we'd fought against. It feels almost defiant to carry it, knowing its owners are either gone or claiming they never really believed in it anyway. Later I learned this tragic scene wasn't a one-off. All across Germany in these final days, officials, SS officers, even ordinary families were taking their own lives rather than face surrender. Nazi propaganda drilled into them that we would brutalise and kill them if they gave up. Looking at the ruin around me, I can almost understand their despair, but it still sends a chill through me to see the lengths fear and fanaticism drove them. In the aftermath of taking that city, as we secure the streets and tend to the living, I begin to notice a curious trend. Everyone we encounter insists they had never truly supported the Nazis. It's as if all the Ardent Party members evaporated overnight. Old women wringing their hands assure us, through our interpreter, that their sons were never Nazis, just conscripts forced to fight. Shopkeepers hasten to explain that any Hitler portraits or swastika pins we might find were just for show, to avoid trouble. We had to join the party or lose our jobs, one grey-haired man tells me nervously, eyes darting. I never wanted any of this. It seems every civilian has a ready explanation, a claim of ignorance or coercion. They all paint themselves as ordinary Germans who were dragged along by a few fanatics. Maybe some of them even tell the truth. We know not everyone here was a die-hard. How could they be? But hearing these choruses of denial, I feel a pang of anger. It's too easy, them disavowing it all at the 11th hour. Part of me wants to ask, if none of you believed in it, how did it go so far? But I hold my tongue. They are defeated, frightened, and in many cases just trying to survive one day to the next. Arguing history with them isn't my job. Still, it sticks with me how swiftly the symbols of Nazism disappear from sight. The swastika armbands, the portraits of Hitler. By the time we arrive, most have been torn down or hidden. All the Heil Hitlers and slogans evaporate, leaving behind just ordinary people who claim to know nothing. It's jarring, and it makes me realise that the Germany we're occupying is already shedding its Nazi skin, trying to blend into something more innocuous right in front of our eyes. The contrast to our reception in France the year before is striking. I remember liberating a small town in Normandy in 1944. Villagers there rushed out to greet us, offering wine, bread, flowers, tears of joy in their eyes. We were heroes to them, liberators casting out the hated occupiers. We tread carefully, feeling almost like guests despite having had to shoot our way in. But here in Germany, there are no cheering crowds, no heartfelt embraces, just fearful faces peering over white flags. Here we are conquerors, not guests, and we behave accordingly. In France, we'd hesitated to requisition someone's home without permission. In Germany, we walk into houses unannounced and take whatever shelter we need without a second thought. German sensibilities aren't a priority now. It's an odd thing, freeing one land with compassion and respect, then occupying another with cold efficiency, all within a year's time. War changes its character depending on whose soil you're standing on. As our column moves out of that city, I hear one GI behind me murmur, "Hell of a sight, ain't it?" There's an edge to his tone, grim satisfaction. Gives you a bit of joy, seeing Germany get back some of what it gave, he continues. I don't reply, but I understand. Many of us harbour that vindictive spark, remembering stories of London, of Rotterdam, of our own buddies killed. In that moment, staring at those ruins, it's easy to think this is fitting payment. Yet, as I look at the day's civilians picking their way through rubble, I also feel an uncomfortable twinge of pity despite myself. One thing changes quickly once the gunfire stops. The children. At first, in the villages and cities we enter, kids hide away just like the adults. But hunger and curiosity draw them out. A day or two after we secure that devastated city, I see them creeping around the edges of our camp in ones and twos. Thin little kids in threadbare clothes with big, wary eyes taking in every detail of us. The army brass has issued strict orders forbidding all fraternization with Germans. We're not even supposed to initiate a smile or give gum to babies. Popular opinion back home worries that if we get too friendly, we'll go soft on former Nazis. But try telling a GI he can't toss a chocolate bar to a starving kid. It's just not going to stick. I remember one afternoon I was sitting on a doorstep eating a K-ration meal. A boy of maybe 7 was watching me from behind an overturned wagon. He wears an oversized coat belted at the waist, probably his father's, and no shoes on his feet, which are caked in mud. Dirt smudges his cheeks. When I pull out the little stick of gum that comes in the ration pack, his eyes lock onto it. I sigh, break the gum in half, and hold a piece out. He approaches cautiously, then snatches it and darts back. You should see him chewing, eyes closed like it's the greatest thing he's ever tasted. Word must spread, because soon I have a small flock of children around me, quietly peering at the strange American soldier who has sweets. I end up handing out every bit of candy and biscuit I have left. A little girl with pigtails appears from behind a ruined truck, eyeing the scene. I offer her a piece of a chocolate bar, and she gives the tiniest smile before darting off to share it with an even smaller sibling who's peeking from a doorway. Technically, I'm breaking orders, but the look on those kids' faces is worth whatever slap on the wrist might come. Even some of the hardest guys in our outfit do the same, slipping gum to kids or tossing them tins of food when officers aren't watching. There's just no sense in being cold to hungry children, enemy or not. And honestly, those simple acts of kindness do more to break the ice than any stern policy could. After that, the kids wave when we pass, and even a few adults manage cautious smiles. It feels like, in those small human moments, the war between us and the civilians is over, even if the bigger war still rages elsewhere. Not all encounters with German soldiers are through the sights of a rifle either. As the German front crumbles in April, we begin to see whole groups of enemy troops giving up without a fight. One clear morning, my platoon is moving through a forested road when we see a white handkerchief tied to a stick, waving frantically from behind a tree. A moment later, a helmet on a rifle appears, then a pair of trembling hands. "Cover them," our lieutenant says softly, and we all level our weapons just in case. One by one they come out of the woods. German soldiers, maybe a dozen of them, unarmed, hands raised above their heads. What strikes me is how ragged and young or old they are. A couple of grey-haired men well past 40. One is a scrawny kid who could be 15 or 16. Their uniforms are stained with mud and sweat, some coats missing, and they look half-starved and dead on their feet. I notice several have no proper boots. One older fellow wears what look like carpet slippers, another has cloth tied around his feet in place of shoes. Their army is literally coming apart at the seams. One man has a crude bandage on his arm, blood seeping through. Another is so exhausted he drops to his knees the moment he reaches the road. They are terrified, that's clear. Their eyes dart to our faces, trying to read if we're about to gun them down. I've heard stories, and yes, there have been instances where surrendering troops were shot, especially if our guys were furious over recent casualties or atrocities. War isn't clean. Not everyone shows mercy in the moment. These Germans don't know which kind of Americans we are. I can see one of them visibly trembling, tears in his eyes. It's a young private with barely any peach fuzz on his chin. In that moment, he looks more like a scared teenager than a threat. Our lieutenant tells them in German to lie down and put their hands behind their heads, which they gratefully do. We move in, frisk them quickly. No weapons, just a few photos of families, some letters, a pocket knife or two. I pat down the crying young one. From his breast pocket I pull out a crumpled photograph. It's a picture of a smiling woman with a baby in her arms, likely his wife and child. The boy watches me with terrified eyes. I quickly place it back in his pocket and give a small nod. "It's okay," I say softly. He probably doesn't understand the words, but maybe he catches the tone. He seems to relax a fraction. One older fellow has a rusty revolver tucked in his boot, likely for suicide rather than fighting, but he surrenders it without fuss when we find it. Once we secure them, the tension drops noticeably. My buddy lets out a breath and mutters, "Poor bastards." And indeed, up close they look pitiful. Hollow cheeks, filthy uniforms, the smell of fear and unwashed bodies mixed together. Not exactly the supermen of Hitler's propaganda. What happens next surprises even me. One of our squad, a guy named Johnson, lights a cigarette, takes a puff, and then wordlessly offers it to the nearest German, a middle-aged man with spectacles who blinks in disbelief. Hesitantly, the German leans forward so Johnson can put the cigarette between his lips. His hands are still on his head. Then Johnson lights another and hands it to the next man. Another GI produces a chocolate bar from his ration and breaks it up, sharing pieces with a couple of the younger Germans. None of us say anything monumental. We don't speak much German, and they speak no English. But the look in their eyes says enough. A mixture of relief, gratitude and confusion. They had heard the same horror stories about us that we had about them. To be treated with basic kindness, after all that likely feels like mercy from heaven. Several of them keep repeating, "Danke! Danke! Thank you," under their breath. One older German actually starts quietly sobbing, maybe from relief that he will see another day. Another younger prisoner stumbles from weakness, and one of our guys catches his arm to steady him rather than let him fall. There's no gloating, no hatred in that march. Honestly, in that moment, they aren't dangerous enemies, just defeated men. We gather them up and march them back toward our lines to be processed as POWs. The walk takes about an hour. They pass through what used to be a town. Now it's just rubble and smoke and the occasional wall standing alone like a tombstone. As we lead those German prisoners away from the front, the path takes us back through a village we'd secured earlier. Our own convoys often have to slow to a crawl or halt entirely, as the human flood of refugees and surrendering troops crosses our path. Tanks and jeeps yield to columns of weary people, an army of displaced civilians and freed prisoners larger than any military force. It's chaotic and humbling to witness. As we escort the bedraggled German soldiers through the ruined village, a few German civilians emerge to watch their once proud army shuffle by behind us. I see an old woman standing in a doorway, a ragged shawl around her thin shoulders. Her expression is hard to read. Anger, relief, exhaustion, probably all three. She doesn't speak or spit or anything, just stares. It strikes me that for these civilians too, the war is taking a new turn. Their fathers, sons and brothers are coming home not as victors, but as prisoners. What must she feel seeing that? I can't know. I only dip my helmet in a brief nod as I pass, and she in turn gives the slightest wary inclination of her head. In that subtle exchange, I sense both resentment and a strange sort of gratitude. Perhaps simply that the killing is over. The quiet on that forest road as we lead those German prisoners to the rear is broken only by the crunch of our boots and an occasional soft sniffle from one of the men. It is one of the most humane moments I've experienced in the whole war, and the prisoners keep coming. As April wears on, the trickle of surrendering squads turns into a flood. Entire German divisions are laying down arms. I remember passing by a makeshift POW pen near a village, just a barbed wire enclosure in an open field, where hundreds upon hundreds of German soldiers are gathered. As I gaze over the wire, I realise there are more enemy soldiers packed in there than the entire population of my hometown back in Ohio. A sea of weary, field-grey uniforms and blank faces stretching across that muddy field. They stand or sit in dejected clusters, still in their uniforms but now stripped of the weapons and insignia. Some look relieved to be out of it. Others just stare blankly, their world having collapsed. We give them water, food and medical attention as we can, but so many are coming in that it's hard to keep up. The scale of surrender is staggering. I hear talk that millions of German soldiers are now in Allied custody. The war is ending not with one last epic battle, but with a giant collective giving up. For weeks we've been hearing rumours and whispers about the enemy's collapse. Some say Hitler has fled to a mountain redoubt in Austria for a last stand. Others swear he's already dead by his own hand. We don't know what to believe. We know Soviet troops are closing in on Berlin, fighting street by street, and that both armies, ours and the Russians, are racing to grab what territory they can. A few men in my unit speculate the war might drag on for months in the Alps if fanatics retreat there, but most of us feel the end is near. You can practically sense the desperation in the enemy evaporating. Not all camps we stumble upon are for enemy soldiers. A few days before finding the horror I'm about to describe, we had a very different experience at another camp. This one turned out to be a prisoner of war camp holding Allied captives, Brits, Canadians, Americans, even some French and Poles. When our tanks rolled up to its gates, the reaction was like night and day compared to what we would soon see at the concentration camps. Emaciated though they were, the piadolos erupted in cheers and shouts of joy the moment they saw our uniforms. I'll never forget a British sergeant, thin as a rail and leaning on a homemade crutch, limping up to me with the biggest grin I've ever seen. "Bloody good to see you, Yanks," he laughed as if we were old friends. One American POW, skeletal but grinning, recognised one of our sergeants as a fellow New Yorker and threw his arms around him in exuberance. It was like witnessing a family reunion in the middle of chaos. Our guys started tearing at the barbed wire fences to get in and embrace them. Some of the liberated men were crying openly, and a few of my fellow GIs were too, despite the smiles. We shared whatever rations and cigarettes we had on us right there. One of my buddies gave a trembling former POW a sip from his canteen and chocolate bar, and the poor guy had to eat slowly to keep from getting sick. He'd been on starvation rations for weeks. Some of the British Tommies tipped their tattered caps and insisted on shaking hands with every single one of us, eyes shining with gratitude. We radioed for medics and transport, and as we waited, we just mingled, listening to their stories. Many had been marched here from other camps, half-starved and unsure if they'd ever see home again. That day we got to tell them they would. It was one of the few outright happy moments in the whole campaign, seeing hope ignite in eyes that had been dulled by despair. When we finally escorted those Allied prisoners out of that barbed wire enclosure, it felt like a small piece of justice in the midst of so much misery. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares us for what we find later that April, when we discover a different kind of camp. Along the way to Munich, a foul stench fills the air, growing stronger mile by mile. It's dawn, late April 1945, somewhere in what used to be Germany. The sound of American tank treads grinding closer pulls us from our thoughts. We're approaching what looks like an industrial site or prison just outside a town. The smell is overpowering. The wind carries an odour of decay and excrement that clings to our throats. For an hour or two, laughter actually returns to our ranks. We toast everything, surviving another day, the thought of the war ending soon, even the poor brewmaster, wherever he is, who unwittingly provided our feast. One of the guys pulls out a harmonica and plays a slurred rendition of Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, which gets a lot of chuckles. A few of the more daring try to teach the rest of us a German drinking song they've heard from POWs. It feels surreal, sharing a boisterous moment in a candlelit cellar while somewhere not far away people are still fighting and dying. But those brief respites keep us sane. As we stumble back to our billets that night, someone jokes, "If this is what occupying Germany is like, I could get used to it. We all know it won't all be beer and Skittles, but for that night we let ourselves forget the war and just be young and alive." May 1945. The war is nearly over. I can feel it in the way entire German armies are surrendering, and in the rumours flying around. Hitler is dead. Some say by his own hand. Berlin has fallen to the Russians. By early May, our unit finds itself occupying a quiet little town in the foothills of the Alps. Snow-capped mountains rise in the distance, tranquil and oblivious to the bloodshed that has finally ceased. We spend our days on routine patrols and manning checkpoints, but there are no more battles to fight. We're just waiting. And then, on May 8th, The news comes down. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe is officially over. It's a mild spring afternoon, sunshine pouring over the Alpine foothills dotted with blooming wildflowers, a cruelly beautiful setting for history to turn a page. I hear the news from our lieutenant, who reads it off a telegram sheet. For a moment, there's no sound except the breeze and the creaking of an old inn sign on the village square. Then a few guys let out whoops and start hugging each other. I find myself strangely quiet, the paper's words sinking in. It's over. After years of violence and fear and exhaustion, it's just over. I sit down on the stone steps of the village fountain, feeling the weight in my legs ease a little. A couple of our tanks sound their horns in celebration, and I hear some distant gunshots, probably joyous shots into the air from another unit. But our platoon mostly stays calm. Some shake hands or slap backs. One GI breaks out a hidden bottle of French cognac he's been saving, and pours swigs for anyone who wants. I take a sip. It burns going down, but it warms me. We toast quietly to victory, to fallen friends who aren't here to see this, to making it out alive. What surprises me is that as the news sinks in, some of the local Germans cautiously join in the subdued celebration. A few villagers emerge from their homes with whatever they have to offer. An elderly woman brings out a tray with a steaming pot of acorn coffee and passes tin cups to some of our men. A couple of girls, maybe in their late teens, appear with baskets of fresh-baked bread and even a few bottles of home-brewed beer they had hidden away. We exchange awkward smiles and gestures of thanks. One of our guys tries out a phrase from a pocket German guide, Dankeschön, which makes the girls giggle softly. At one point, a little tow-haired girl who'd been hiding behind her mother's skirt toddles forward and shyly extends a small bouquet of wildflowers to Private Harris. He kneels and accepts them gently, uttering a soft Danke. The mother watches with a cautious smile, tears in her eyes. That silent exchange, enemy child and soldier sharing flowers, says more than any treaty could in that moment. It's a gentle, tentative peace offering on both sides. Only days ago, strict orders forbade us from even chatting with Germans. But on this night, it feels like those walls of fear and formality crack just a little. I see our battle-hardened sergeant, who usually referred to Krauts with a scowl, raise a tin cup of that bitter coffee toward the trembling hands of the woman serving it, almost like a toast. No words, but the gesture says enough. Enemies one day, humans sharing a quiet moment the next. That night, I take a walk just outside the village. The stars are out, and for once no searchlights or flares compete with them. Without the glare of city lights, all of Europe was darkened for war. The stars look impossibly bright, a shimmering band of the Milky Way arching overhead. I find the Big Dipper and trace its pointer stars to the North Star, thinking how that same star guided explorers and wanderers for centuries. Now it shines silently over soldiers and civilians alike, friend and former foe, as we all step into an unknown tomorrow. The night breeze carries the scent of wet grass and pine from the nearby woods. It's a clean smell, free of smoke and blood, and I savour it. I find myself by a little chapel on a hill at the village edge. Its wooden doors are open, and inside a single candle burns, left by some locals earlier. I step in and sit on a wooden pew at the back. The faint scent of melted wax and old incense hangs in the air. In the dim interior I can just make out a simple altar at the front, and above it a wooden crucifix silhouetted against the darkness. A few votive candles flicker near a statue of the Virgin Mary in a corner, their tiny flames dancing as the night air moves through the open door. I'm not an especially religious man, but sitting here I bow my head. For the first time in a long time I pray. For my fallen friends, for the victims of this war, for the people of this country and mine, and for a better future for all of us. The words are simple and halting, but they bring a measure of solace. Through the open window I catch the scent of night-blooming flowers mixing with the cool air. My mind drifts over the past months. The ruined cities, the surrendered soldiers, the faces of those camp survivors, the children smiling over chocolate, the white flags fluttering from windows, all of it swirling in this journey that led to here, to this quiet moment. Images drift through my mind in the silence. I see again the old man holding his white flag at the village edge, the hollow-eyed children reaching for candy, the endless rows of German prisoners shuffling down a road, the bombed-out city square with that doll lying in the dust, the corpses in the camp and the faces of those who survived. All these sights are part of me now. Perhaps I'll spend a lifetime sorting through them. But under these stars, in this moment, I simply let them wash over me, acknowledging them and then letting them go, one by one, into the night. I don't know what comes next. Occupation duty, eventually going home, it's all uncertain. My thoughts wander to the future. Will I be going home soon? In a few months, maybe I'll be back in Ohio, sitting on our porch with my family, telling them about this place. Will the nightmares of what I saw here follow me home? I suspect they will, at least for a while. And what of this town, this country? How long before children here laugh again, before shops reopen and life mends itself? These questions swirl with no easy answers. After a while, I step back outside. A very thin sliver of moon has risen, casting pale light on the village below. I can see a few silhouettes of my comrades strolling, enjoying the rare peace, and here and there the faint glow of cigarettes in the dark. In one of the houses through an open window I hear a soft melody. Someone is playing a piano, slowly, a lullaby or a hymn. The music drifts up the hill, almost like a benediction for the end of a nightmare. I lean against the chapel's stone doorway and just listen, letting the gentle notes and the cool night air wash over me. We came to Germany expecting fury and fire, and we found plenty of that, but we also found emptiness and sorrow, and ordinary people just glad the killing was done. We found a beautiful land scarred by evil and war, a defeated country trying to surrender and survive, and now we have found an ending of sorts, though nothing feels neatly concluded. There's no real closure in war, just an exhaustion and a hope that what comes after might be better. Victory, I realise, is a complicated thing. We have won, yes, but at a price that can't be tallied just in ruined buildings or enemy dead. It's in the empty chairs back home, the graves of friends, the eyes of those camp survivors. Standing here in the silence, it doesn't feel like the jubilant triumph the newspapers will surely proclaim. It's more like the end of a long, dark night and the first uncertain light of dawn, a time to breathe again, to mourn, and to rebuild. As the stars wheel slowly overhead, I close my eyes and take a deep breath of the calm, starlit air. For tonight at least, here in this defeated country, there is peace, fragile and unreal, but peace nonetheless. And for now, that's enough.